Welcome, folks. You know, we're living through the spiritual collapse of the West, where the line between moral relativism and outright insanity has completely vanished. The American left, still foaming at the mouth after Trump crippled Iran's nuclear sites, has shifted from anti-war slogans to full-blown sympathy for theocrats. You've got radicals in our own elections, like Zohran Mamdani in New York, rising to power on a cocktail of socialism and Sharia law, while Democrats cheer it on in the name of diversity. And the media, well, they're not just complicit, they're narrating the decline with a straight face. Case in point, CNN calmly reporting from a ceremony in Tehran where hundreds of women lift their babies into the air to offer them up as martyrs. And instead of outrage, we get a tone of cultural reverence, like martyrdom is just an exotic parenting style. By the way, this isn't journalism anymore. It's just straight up propaganda for death cults. Let's watch.
Martyrdom is a hugely important concept here in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Oh, really?
We're currently at an event where hundreds of women hold their babies into the air to show that they're willing to offer their children as martyrs for God and for Imam Hussein. All of that goes back to the legendary Battle of Karbala, where Imam Hussein held his baby into the air, asking the enemy that was besieging Karbala to give the baby water, and instead the enemy killed the baby. Now, there's nothing more glorious here than dying as a martyr. And of course, right now, that concept takes on an even more important meaning as Iran is involved in this massive struggle with Israel and the United States.
We want to show them we are not scared of anything, she says, and will support our state until they are destroyed. And she says they need to know that Imam Hussein is our everything, and we should sacrifice our lives for Imam Hussein. This is a symbol saluting Imam Hussein, she says, who's the leader of all the oppressed who stand against oppressors and don't submit.
And just to show how big this is in Iran right now, the crowd here was chanting "Death to America, Death to Israel," and there was even a children's choir that was singing songs as videos were shown of Iran's missile program in action against Israel, and of course also when the Trump administration carried out those strikes against Iranian nuclear installations. In total, right now, as this conflict is taking place, all of this extremely important to the folks here.
Wow. Great reporting there, CNN. Always bolt a centered American reporter into a room full of people chanting "Death to America" and somehow frame the whole thing like a touching cultural moment, complete with lullabies about missile strikes and sacrificial infants. But this isn't just about media malpractice. What we're watching is a convergence of ideological rot at home and blood-soaked fanaticism abroad, propped up by the same left that claims to stand for peace, progress, and human rights. The straight-up glorification of martyrdom, especially involving children, isn't a fringe anomaly. It's a systemic outcome of a worldview where victimhood is currency, death is redemption, and the enemy is always Western civilization. And the American left, increasingly post-national and morally disoriented, finds itself unable, or perhaps unwilling, to draw any line between resistance and barbarism. This moment reveals the cost of cultural self-loathing. When you believe your country is a problem, you'll sympathize with anyone who promises to destroy it, even if they sing through a children's choir. And there is no greater hater of America who would enjoy more than anyone a children's choir of suicide bombers taking out some portion of the nation than MSDNC commentator Elie Mystal, named after the fact that he misses all of his takes. Let's see what he had to say about the recent Supreme Court ruling to overturn the ability of activist judges to issue nationwide injunctions, essentially preventing the executive from being the executive.
Imagine Donald Trump wants to do something illegal to you, Ali Velshi. Imagine that he wants to murder you. Imagine that he and Stephen Miller release an entire policy explaining about how they can murder Canadian journalists who are working in America because they're taking the jobs from real American journalists.
Why do you go
right? So
straight
he's
to that?
going to murder you. So you, Ali Velshi, you go to court. You go to court in the Southern District of New York and you say, like, I don't think this murder thing is constitutional. It's clearly illegal. It's clearly constitutional.
Absolute
Donald
false
Trump
equivalence.
and Pam Bondi and Stephen Miller shouldn't be able to have a plan to murder me. And the court says, you're right, Ali Velshi. There's no way Donald Trump is allowed to murder you. We're going to have an injunction. We're going to stay the executive order saying that he's going to murder Canadian journalists. And so you're like, great, awesome. And you go home. And then Pat Kiernan shows up and he's like, what about me? I'm also a Canadian. Ashley Banfield shows up. She's, I'm also a Canadian. What about me? And the court's, well, I can't help you because Ali Velshi is the one who sued. So Pat Kiernan, if you don't want to be murdered, you have to launch your entire own lawsuit in the Southern District of New York again to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't murder you. And while the Supreme Court is deciding who the Ali Velshi can't be murdered injunction applies to, guess what? Donald Trump starts murdering people.
Oh, my God.
That is the upshot of yesterday's decision. Donald Trump has declared that he is going to do an unconstitutional thing. And various people have been able to secure the court's order that he cannot do the unconstitutional thing to them. And basically what the Supreme Court has said is that, well, you said something about Jimmy, but you didn't say anything about Consuela, so we're going to deport Consuela while the Supreme Court figures it out. That is what the court said. And
I appreciate it. And Pat...
Sideshow Bob called. He wants his haircut back. By the way, Professor Q-Tip over here thinks he's delivering a constitutional lecture. But what we're really watching is MSDNC auditioning for American Horror Story, Law School Edition. Elie Mystal's unhinged fantasy about Trump plotting mass murder isn't just pure theatrics. It's a textbook case of a dangerous false equivalence wrapped in hysteria. He takes a nuanced Supreme Court ruling on nationwide injunctions, a legal practice both Obama and Biden openly criticized as judicial overreach, and turns it into a paranoid fever dream where every conservative executive order ends in mass assassination. That's not analysis. It's ideological fan fiction. But the deeper issue is what this reveals about our culture. When the left loses institutional control, whether it's the courts, the narrative, or the presidency, they resort to apocalyptic storytelling to delegitimize anyone outside of their tribe. They can't argue the merits of the ruling, so they invent a horror plot and cast themselves as the hunted. It's fear porn dressed up as constitutional insight, and it's rotting public discourse from the inside out. And in case you think only the pundits on MSDNC speak in this inflammatory manner, I'm here to tell you that this goes all the way up the chain. Even U.S. senators like Bernard Sanders are speaking this way.
The Republican Party has not just become a right-wing extremist party. In many cases, it's become like a Stalinist party, a cult of the individual. And what the party is about now is that Trump says something, and if you have an independent thought, if you disagree with Mr. Trump, if you think maybe what he's proposing doesn't work for your constituents, you're out of here. You raise your voice, and in 5 minutes, they will be announcing a primary to your election. So what happened is Tillis thought that this was a bad piece of legislation for North Carolina. He's right, it was. And the result of that is Trump said, good, we're going to primary you. You have the same thing in the House, with the very few people who are prepared to disagree with Trump. So right now, the Republican Party people are just afraid to dissent. And all you have to do is say, I love President Trump. I will do anything and everything he says. Hey, that's what being a candidate in the Republican Party is today. Pretty pathetic.
We should take Bernie Sanders seriously. After all, he's speaking from his lived experience. This is the same man who honeymooned in the Soviet Union, praised Fidel Castro's literacy programs, and once defended breadlines in communist countries as a sign of economic fairness. So when Bernie accuses today's GOP of being Stalinistic, what we're really witnessing is projection from someone who spent decades romanticizing actual authoritarian communist regimes. His claim that the Republican Party is a cult of the individual reveals how deeply the left misunderstands both the nature of conservatism and the populist shift in American politics. What Bernie describes as cultish loyalty is in reality a voter base that finally expects its representatives to reflect their values and holds them accountable when they don't. That's called political agency, not Stalinism. But in the modern left's moral vocabulary, any resistance to progressive orthodoxy is painted as fascism. And any disciplined political coalition on the right is framed as totalitarian. It's not just dishonest, it's a desperate attempt to distract from the left's own internal authoritarian drift. Ideological purges, speech policing, and the cultural blacklisting of dissent, things that we've seen them do on mass scale, often with the backing of massive corporations such as Facebook, Google, etc. But in today's America, calling your opponents Stalinist while excusing actual Marxist regimes isn't just hypocrisy. It's a well-curated strategy that the left is unfolding before our very eyes, as though we're blind. And speaking of Stalinist communists, we can't do a segment on that without mentioning Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani, who just won the Democrat primary for New York City mayor. He was recently exposed in a resurfaced clip saying this.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production.
Whoa! Look, folks, all jokes aside, this talk about taking over the means of production, we all know what that means. And America will never be a communist country. It's not who we are, and it's not who we'll ever become. Too many of us immigrants, veterans, working families have seen firsthand what happens when government seizes total control of your life, your labor, and your liberty. So when Zohran Mamdani, the front runner for mayor of New York City, casually declares that the end goal is to seize the means of production, he's not offering a bold new idea. He's recycling the same tyrannical script that's destroyed nations and starved millions, that destroyed Venezuela. The problem isn't just that his rhetoric exists. It's that it's being normalized. In elite coastal circles, advocating socialism isn't fringe anymore. It's fashionable. You've got people like Cynthia Nixon and Emily Ratajkowski coming out in support for a man who will literally send them to the gulag the first chance he gets. And the worst part about all this is that everybody supporting Mamdani and Mamdani himself cloak everything they say, all these communist talking points, in language about justice and equity, but it always ends the same way. State power, crushed dissent, and economic collapse. Mamdani's plan for government-run grocery stores, rent control, free everything, none of it is new. It's the Soviet Union playbook with Brooklyn branding. And if these neo-Marxist ideologues think they can hijack this republic without resistance, they are gravely mistaken. This isn't just about bad policy. It's about preserving the soul of a free country against people who would burn it down in the name of empowering themselves in a brand new utopia.
And realize there's a policy proposal that says your plan, and I'm going to quote it for folks, is to shift the tax burden from overtaxed homeowners in the outer boroughs to more expensive homes in richer and whiter neighborhoods. Explain why you are bringing race into your tax proposal.
That is just a description of what we see right now. It's not driven by race. It's more of an assessment of what neighborhoods are being undertaxed versus overtaxed. We've seen time and again that this is a property tax system that is inequitable. It's one that actually Eric Adams ran on, saying that he would change in the first 100 days. He's since sought to defend it and lost at every juncture in court.
And I understand you're saying we're simply describing the types of neighborhoods that would see these increase in taxes, and yet by invoking race, do you run the risk of potentially alienating key constituents?
I think I'm just naming things as they are. And ultimately, the thing that motivates me in this is to create a system of fairness. It is not to work backwards from a racial assessment of neighborhoods or our city. Rather, it's to ensure that we actually have an equal playing field. And right now, what we see with the property tax system is one that is overtaxing a number of New Yorkers and undertaxing others, and an inability of political will to resolve that.
So no plans to change that language on your website?
The focus here is to actually ensure a fair property tax system, and that the use of that language is just an assessment of the neighborhood.
All right.
This is racist. Plain and simple. No way around it. Mamdani is just slimy enough to wrap it in academic jargon and call it fairness, but the policy speaks for itself. tax people more because of the color of their neighborhood. He tries to dodge responsibility by saying he's just naming things as they are. But that's the oldest trick in the progressive playbook. Inject race into everything, then act surprised when people call it out. What this moment reveals is the next evolution of identitarian socialism. Weaponize historical guilt, frame inequality as injustice, and justify state-sanctioned discrimination under the guise of equity. This isn't about correcting the tax code, by the way. It's about engineering a permanent political class built on resentment and redistribution. And the media predictably shrinks away from the core question. If Mamdani's plan is truly race neutral, why is race explicitly used as a justification for who gets taxed more? Because in today's America, the new definition of justice isn't blind. It's selective, ideological, and deeply corrosive to any real concept of equal treatment under the law. Anyway, Mamdani also recently responded to Tom Homan saying that they will continue to enforce immigration laws in sanctuary cities like New York City, and his response is anything but unpredictable.
Game on, he's coming. What do you say?
That I'm going to be here to stand up and fight back. And unlike the current mayor, I'm not going to be working alongside the Trump administration to build the single largest deportation force in American history. I'm going to actually represent each and every New Yorker. And that includes immigrant New Yorkers. And that means standing up for the laws of this city, like our sanctuary city policies, which have kept New Yorkers safe for decades and were defended by Republicans and Democrats alike for years until we got this mayor who fear-mongered about them so extensively.
Does that involve the NYPD?
It means that the NYPD would actually serve New Yorkers and not assist ICE in their operations. We recently saw ICE agents.
So they would not assist ICE?
Not assisting ICE, because ultimately their job is public safety.
And as every American knows, enforcing the law isn't part of public safety, at least not in Zohran Mamdani's version of reality. What he's proposing isn't just radical, it's openly insurrectionist. This is a man running for mayor of the largest city in the country while publicly vowing to obstruct federal law enforcement, sabotage immigration enforcement, and weaponize the NYPD against federal officers. And he does it under the guise of protecting public safety, as if ignoring detainer requests and shielding criminal aliens has made New York safer. It hasn't. Crime has surged, quality of life has deteriorated, and trust in city leadership has quickly evaporated. That's why he's the front runner in the race, because people don't trust establishment Democrats anymore, and Republicans don't have a footing in most major cities anymore. If anything, this moment crystallizes the deep fracture in American governance. A growing faction of local leaders see themselves not as stewards of law and order, but as political activists using city power to wage ideological war against the federal government. And when the laws they defy happen to be the ones keeping violent criminals off the streets, that's not resistance, it's collapse. By the way, it's no coincidence that so many of these mayors are fighting back against Trump. When you look at the statistics that out of the 30 largest cities in America, 27 are run by progressive Democrats, 2 are run by Republicans, and 1 by an independent. So it's no surprise that so many local leaders are acting like Mamdani and going completely balls to the wall crazy. The real question we should be asking is, why are so many of these large cities voting for progressive Democrat leadership? What are they getting out of it? Are they just buying into the entitlement carrot that Democrats keep dangling in front of them? Is that enough to win local elections now?
So when people say democratic socialist, right? And I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on, is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it, like I'm planning to do.
At this point, Democrat Socialist is just the polite rebrand for full-blown authoritarian communist. Let's stop pretending it's about helping the poor. It's actually about consolidating power under the guise of equity. So when Zohran Mamdani says he doesn't like capitalism, he's not offering a nuanced economic critique. He's laying the ideological groundwork for state control of everything from housing to food to transportation and even speech. And like AOC, he wraps it in the language of Dr. King to give it moral cover, despite pushing policies that would destroy the very freedoms Dr. King fought for. What we're seeing is a movement that feeds off justified resentment. Yes, people are struggling, but the solutions being offered are poison pills, more state control, fewer rights, and permanent political dominance for one party, the Democrat Party. The irony is the affordability crisis these socialists scream about was created by the very Democrats that now claim they want to fix all of this through overregulation, reckless spending, and open borders, funny enough, the globalist agenda. But the goal was never solutions. The goal is obviously control. And the more broken the system gets, the more they offer themselves as the only fix. It's not a political platform, if you haven't noticed. It's just a hostile takeover in slow motion. Anyway, Mamdani has been getting paraded around every single cable news show. Every Democrat has an opinion on him, but there is a common theme amongst Democrat lawmakers. For some reason, they won't back him up. And that's exactly the question that Hakeem Jeffries was just confronted with, and his reply was revealing.
We had a conversation on Wednesday morning where I congratulated him on the campaign that he ran, a campaign that clearly was relentlessly focused on the high cost of living in New York City and the economy. He outworked, he out-communicated, and he out-organized the opposition, and that's clearly why he was successful.
So what's holding you back from endorsing him right now?
Well, we don't really know each other well. Our districts don't overlap. I have never had a substantive conversation with him.
Well, it looks like Democrat leadership isn't quite ready to put the full communist just out yet. Funny how the brakes get tapped when the cameras are rolling. Hakeem Jeffries congratulates, Zohran Mamdani, praises his campaign and acknowledges his organizing power. But then when he gets asked to actually endorse the man, suddenly it's, well, we don't really know each other. That's not caution, that's straight up cowardice, because the truth is Mamdani's brand of socialism, seizing the means of production, which is more like communism, taxing neighborhoods based on race, which is more on brand for a South African government than America, and defying federal immigration law isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's the logical endpoint of the Democrat Party's decade-long drift toward identity-based redistribution and activist-driven governance. Jeffries knows this, but he also knows how deeply unpopular it is with the majority of Americans. So instead of leading with conviction, he hides behind distance and plausible deniability. This moment perfectly captures the identity crisis of the modern Democrat Party, caught between the radicals they empower and the voters they still pretend that they represent. Oh, but on the unemployed aisle of the Democrats, they are going full-blown Zohran. They have flags up, they are getting tattoos, they love the man because they've got nothing to lose.
Everyone should get on board and endorse Zohran right now, because our party, our approval numbers are 20-something%. We're on life support. We allowed Trump back in the office again, and our democracy is on the precipice of falling apart. The Democratic Party has to save American democracy. And leaning into Zohran and others who are stars in our party. We got a bunch of stars right here in New York. Chia Saig, Tiffany Caban, AOC, on and on and on. Uplift them. We have to bridge the gap, the generational divide. That's happening in the party between the older, more establishment, and the younger. We have to bridge that gap to save our country.
You know, it's pretty hilarious to me that Democrats can't connect the dots, that the reason why their approval ratings are low is because of people like Zohran Mamdani. These aren't public servants. They're social media stars propped up by activist echo chambers and online fan clubs, not by working class Americans the Democrat Party once claimed to represent. Jamal Bowman says Democrats need to endorse Mamdani to save democracy. But let's be clear for a second here, okay? Because they clearly have no clarity. What they're trying to save is their grip on a political machine that's bleeding support across the country. They push to elevate figures like Mamdani, AOC, Tiffany Caban, Jasmine Crockett. None of that is going to bridge generational divides. It's about accelerating a radical transformation of the party into a hard left ideological bloc that sees America's founding principles as the problem. They weaponize words like democracy to mean obedience to their agenda while smearing any opposition as fascism. But in reality, their vision undermines everything our republic requires. free speech, equal justice, and shared national identity. This isn't about saving the country. It's about remaking it in the image of people who fundamentally resent what it stands for. But you know this wouldn't be a segment about brain-dead Democrat takes without AOC rubbing her last 2 cents together.
This isn't just about Mr. Mamdani as an individual. This is about the message that the people of New York City are trying to send to our party, and particularly in the fact that the entire Democratic establishment, given a broad range of candidates to support across all sorts of different ideas, still decided to stubbornly choose Andrew Cuomo, who is a leader, who has been a leader for a very long time when the people are clearly asking for generational change. You know, I think it speaks to the fact that I think a lot of those lessons do need to be learned, and I hope that they're learned soon.
Look, folks, no matter how hard AOC and far-left Democrats try to paint Mamdani's win as the people of New York City rising up, it's a Democrat primary, which statistically is driven by the most ideologically extreme factions of the party. So no, this isn't some citywide mandate for communism. It's the result of low turnout organizing by the activist fringe. And while New York certainly leans left, to pretend the entire city has embraced anti-capitalist revolution is both delusional and insulting. New York is still one of the business and finance capitals of the world, a place built by entrepreneurs, immigrants, and workers chasing opportunity, not begging the state to seize the means of production. When AOC says Democrats should mimic Zohran Mamdani, what she's really saying is abandon the center, double down on communism, and make the party unelectable outside its safest coastal bubbles. By the way, that's not a strategy to save our republic. It's a roadmap to political suicide. But hey, if the left wants to campaign on abolishing ICE, raising taxes based on skin color, and nationalizing grocery stores, by all means, be my guest. Anyway, the best take by far on Mamdani has come from the president. This is what he had to say.
He's a communist. I think it's very bad for New York. I don't know that he's going to get in. It's inconceivable that but he's a communist, and he's a pure communist. I think he admits it, but I can't imagine it. But let's say this. If he does get in, I'm going to be president, and he's going to have to do the right thing, or they're not getting any money. He's got to do the right thing. It's shocking that I would have assumed that I used to say we will never have a socialist in this country. No, but we'll have a communist. I mean, he's a communist. He's going to be mayor of New York. So I was very surprised when I said, I never heard of him. I don't know who he is.
Well, he said he's going to fight ICE. He's not going to allow ICE to...
He'll be very unsuccessful.
And he said if Benjamin Netanyahu comes to New York, he's going to have him arrested.
Oh, he's a radical left lunatic.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So the question now is simple. How much of this are we willing to tolerate before we admit we've crossed the line we can't walk back? When openly radical ideologues are not only normalized but celebrated, and when calling that out is treated as fringe, who's really steering the culture? These aren't isolated ideas. They're signals of where power is shifting and who's willing to exploit chaos to seize it. Ask yourself, when did defending the basic structure of law, order, and liberty become controversial? And more importantly, if we're mocked, silenced, or sidelined for doing so, what does that say about the future being built in our name? Maybe it's time to stop taking the narrative at face value and start asking who benefits when truth is rebranded as hate and extremism is repackaged as progress. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.